You're listening to Convenience Matters, brought to you by NACS. Whether it's for food, fuel, drinks, or snacks, about half of the U.S. population shops at a convenience store every day. We'll talk about what we see at stores and what the future may hold for our industry.
Okay, competition is intense out there now, not just in our channel, but with all other channels. So where do you go to find ideas that can potentially grow your business, to look at who are the great performers out there? What are they doing? Does it work for you? That's what we're going to talk about today. Welcome to Convenience Matters. My name is Jeff Lenard with NACS.
And I'm Carolyn Schnare, also with NACS.
And today we are joined by Jayme Gough. She's an analyst in our research department here at NACS. And Jayme's going to take us through some of the numbers. What do we see from our 2018 report? What does it mean in 2019 and beyond? So welcome, Jayme.
Hey, thank you, and I'm really glad to be here. This is great.
Awesome. Well, Jayme, so one of the things we talked about before having you on the show is we wanted to talk about benchmarking. So the word benchmarking, it's kind of a scary word to those of us like me who's not a big statistician or numbers chick, if you will. But every year we have a big industry event, the State of the Industry Summit, where we invite tons of people. We have upwards of 500 or more people coming to this. So benchmarking is clearly seen among our industry as something that's very important, and you, every day, very important. So
Absolutely.
Tell me, in your words, what is benchmarking?
So benchmarking is essentially discovering what the best performance out there is, and then using that to identify gaps in your own organization's processes in order to gain a competitive advantage and take advantage of what you're doing well, and use what you might not be doing so well as an opportunity to really boost your business. Essentially, you're given an opportunity when you're benchmarking to articulate your strengths and suggest areas that you might want to improve in your business.
So competing on paper, essentially, with your competitors.
Yeah, I mean, so, you can benchmark against your competitors, obviously, against the industry as a whole. You can also benchmark from store to store, or even against different channels. So for us, QSRs, quick service restaurants, as well as dollar chains and dollar stores. Those are some of our top competitors. So we like to benchmark against different channels as well.
And most stores, or many stores, don't have research. They don't have the capability to really go out and figure out what's that guy, or not, you don't know who, because it's anonymous. You don't know what these various people are, but you just generally have a sense of what the top quartile looks like, what the bottom quartile looks like, what the industry average is like, and what are the factors that may lead to success in the top quartile or things like that. That doesn't mean necessarily that if you follow these things, you will succeed. But there are attributes you look at, and with the State of the Industry Enterprise, 199 pages in this book, it kind of takes you through the logical process of here's what merchandise sales look like. Where does your store contribute, both on sales and, more importantly, on profits? And then a variety of other things, numbers related to transaction counts and fuel gallons sold per day, et cetera. It's pretty robust. And is there anything that you get the most feedback on that people just say, that's my favorite section, or that's something that we really appreciate knowing?
Well, as one of the couple of people who put this book together, I don't really want to pick favorites on, what's the best section of the report, but it is
the one you wrote.
Yeah. I'm just kidding. It is extremely robust, and it starts with financial performance. We're looking at operational efficiency. There's a whole section on merchandise, which does break down all of the sales and gross profit dollars for the different merchandise categories, and those are the NACS categories. A whole section on food service. And then, we talk about the quartiles, and that's based on store operating profit. So who is, doing the best at what they're doing out there, and what do their sales look like in their different categories? What are their expenses looking like? And you can use that to benchmark, where you might be based on what your sales and expenses are looking like for your own business.
So, for instance, let's pretend that I'm a single store operator and I have hot dogs on a roller grill and they're doing all right. I don't think they're not selling off the grill. But I'm thinking, okay, well, I want to make this better. Am I doing well? I sell 5 a day. I must be doing great. I think, I run out sometimes on Tuesdays. So I guess I'm doing well. So if I go from that model, I might buy too many hot dogs one day and not enough the next day. But now I'm like, wait a minute, maybe I'm not doing as good as the guy across the street. And I go over there and they're literally selling like hotcakes or hot dogs. And so how would I analyze that? So if I get the SOI report, I'd take a look at that category and see how I'm doing?
Yeah, so it basically comes down to what your goals are for your business. And that's really essential when you're looking at benchmarking or when you're trying, maybe you've been doing it for years or maybe you're just starting with benchmarking and you don't really know, where to start. Making sure that you're setting goals and targets, especially for the different areas that you are investing in. So once you've got those targets kind of set, you can go take a look at what the industry average is looking like and see, if you're maybe below what might be your target, or if you're significantly higher than the industry, maybe you're doing really well in that area and you want to, set some more money aside and invest in there more. It really it depends a little bit on what your goals are, and you can use the report. If you submit data, it makes it even better because you're in there. Just using that to guide what you're doing to make some better business decisions.
And maybe I'm like, well, okay, hot dogs is my thing. I'm going to try something different and I'll go expand my maple syrup sales or something bizarre.
Well, probably maple syrup was something we sold more of in 1969. That was the year of our first SOI. So the year 2020 brings us to our 50th anniversary of putting together research. And our first SOI report was 198 pages shorter than it is now. That is, it was 1 page. It was typed on a typewriter. There were probably a lot of carbon copies behind it. And then they just threw them in the mail. So I think a lot of people right now are just like, what are all those things? But anyway, our sales in 2018 as an industry were $654 billion. Any guess what they were in that first SOI 49 years ago?
$1 million.
3 zeros and you're on. And no, it's not 1,000. It's little over $1 billion. It was $1.1 billion in sales in 1969. So you think about the increase, that's 650 times growth in 49 years. So that's pretty exponential. By the way, right now, the 1.1 billion is about what our industry gives away in charity every year, if you were looking for a benchmark. So pretty impressive growth. And I think a lot of this can be attributed to what we've done with benchmarking over the years and how that can help tell a story. And I remember that in the earlier days of our State of the Industry, it was really more of a focus on telling the industry story. We really didn't have all these quartiles and all these other ways to look at data. It was about telling our industry story because we really weren't part of the conversation. We weren't restaurants. We weren't grocery. We weren't all these other channels. So I think that when I pull out and read the SOI, and I'm reading through the 190-some pages.
199.
199. The coolest things are when you find those little things that are just like, wow, that's really an impressive number when you look at, here's what coffee sales are. Coffee is, I think, something like 11% of food service. And then you look at food service and how it's expanded so greatly, where it's 23% of total in-store sales. Those are the numbers that I think are really incredible from a communication standpoint and how you tell that story. But the real importance of the SOI is how retailers can figure out what their story will be and how can they succeed looking at those numbers.
Right, definitely.
So yes, Jayme, I know that we're talking a lot about retailers and how they can use these numbers to help themselves. Now, another large segment of our audience is suppliers or people who help supply the industry, whether it's CPG companies or product services, people that work on the expense side of things. So a lot of them will purchase the SOI from us. They can't obviously put any data in there, and a lot of them have their own data too. But what's a way that supplier members, people who either maybe even getting into the convenience store industry or hoping to put their products within our industry, what's a way that they can utilize the numbers that the SOI puts out there?
Right. So definitely, I think suppliers will find value in looking at the change and the way products are kind of shifting. I mean, that is obviously part of a greater community and culture, how things change, from year to year. But they can look at, where we're seeing some gaps and what the industry is really looking for, or what would be a great product to put out there because, hey, there's a gap here. Maybe this is an opportunity for us to get involved in such and such. So just really getting deep into the merchandise part of this report and diving in there to see, where the opportunities for them and what retailers might be looking for.
We don't get super product. We do not get product specific in the report, but
Correct.
we do get category specific. What are some of the fastest growing categories? You've said food service, but
yeah, food service for sure. Food service has been growing for years. Jeff mentioned earlier it's about 23% of sales, but more important than that, it's almost 37% of in-store gross margins. So not only is it, you're generating sales dollars there, but you've got really high margins, so you're getting profits out of that section as well. We've seen a lot of interesting things going on in the cigarette category as the smoking rate continues to decline in the United States. It's been in decline since 2007. People are really kind of shifting their preferences, from maybe cigarettes to something like OTP, other tobacco products. That category has just been booming for several years. Other things like alternative snack category has been really interesting.
now what's that?
So that is made up of meat snacks, granola,
Meat nuggets.
yes, maybe. So, there's, as we've kind of seen in the industry and, amongst consumers, people are really opting for different snack choices. And that might be something that's a little more high in protein or maybe something that is resealable and they can take on the go with them. So that category has had a lot of innovation in, recent years, and that's causing a lot of growth there. So retailers have been taking advantage of that, and manufacturers and suppliers as well. There's a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, and it's also interesting in looking from a decade ago, and that was part of what we looked at the State of the Industry Conference, where we looked at what were sales like a decade ago, what has changed in the ensuing decade. And a decade ago, at least using 2008 as the benchmark, gas prices hit $4 a gallon, then they declined to $1.61 a gallon by the end of the year. We had a huge recession, the Great Recession, and we had stores go out of business because they had such low margins those first 6 months of the year. They made a change. A lot of them went into food service, and that's one of the things we talked about at the State of the Industry Summit, how some of these categories that didn't exist 10 years ago are now driving a lot of the sales in stores, things like energy drinks. Bottled water really was a blip on the radar 10 years ago. And that's just in a 10-year lifespan. So I think the SOI also, there's some kind of signals in various categories like this is really growing. Pay attention to this, whether it's going to the NACS show and looking on the product show floor and seeing this lines up with some of the data we're seeing. But there's some pretty cool things when you really dive in.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of, getting a more macro view of what's going on, in general for the different categories, the SOI Summit is a really great place to do that because the deep dive into subcategory level isn't necessarily, we don't have time for it. There's only so much you can pack into a 1.5 day event. So the SOI report really dives really deep into those subcategories and gives you that that sales and those gross profit dollars and the margins that you maybe really want to look at if you're a category manager and you're trying to figure out what your next strategic move is in your operation.
Like maple syrup, if I want to see if my maple syrup sales are now growing since I got rid of the hot dogs.
Maybe if you're in Vermont.
That's true. That's true. Or I'm going to go to a brand new market. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit and talk about expenses. So we talk in a report a lot about different types of expenses, whether it's labor or other direct store operating costs, credit card fees. But that's something. I mean, you benchmark against that, but I think in some cases you're like, oh, good, it's not as bad as I thought it was. A lot of folks might look at it that way. What are some of the things? I mean, at labor specifically, I think you mentioned before that folks should look at or pay attention to when they're looking through the report.
So, when you talk about direct store operating expenses, obviously wages and benefits is the biggest part of that, and I think from retailer to retailer, it really varies. And this is, again, where you have your strategic goals or what you're trying to set in terms of, how your labor force is going to be, how you're going to recruit, how you're going to retain. At some point, you are going to invest in those people. Obviously, there's been some challenges for people or for retailers who are in states with minimum wage laws. So things are, obviously that expense is getting bigger and bigger. One thing that the NACS research department puts out to help retailers with their human resources and human capital, issues is the NACS compensation report. This is similar to the SOI, where retailers will provide their data that is then aggregated and put out in a report annually. And, in there, they've got everything from salaries to benefits to turnover numbers and recruitment numbers, number of interviews, things like that. So for HR professionals and just, C-suite people as well, this report really can help you with your human resource strategic planning.
And even single store operators who may not even have an HR department or an
Right.
HR person.
Right. Yeah, definitely. I mean, you want to know, there's a certain correlation between what you're paying your employees and perhaps what your turnover is. But it's also good to look at, like, across the board. Are you underpaying and that's why your turnover is higher? Are you taking the time to invest in a couple of interviews instead of one interview? So there's things like that in there that you can benchmark your strategies against the industry average.
So I think a lot of people, when they think of NACS research, they think about the SOI Summit, the State of the Industry Summit, a couple days in April, and then miraculously a month and a half later, this 199-page book comes out. Those aren't the only 2 days that research is involved in doing research. There's a lot of benchmarking and a lot of things go on throughout the year. Do you want to tell us a little bit about some of the things that you also do looking at benchmarking, whether it's other opportunities for retailers to find out ways to link up and find out more about what others are doing?
Yep, definitely. So I just mentioned the compensation report is another way that retailers can get involved, and that is just as simple as responding to a survey. And in participating with the survey, you will get a free copy of the report. So there's one way that you can get some of your benchmarking for human resources. We also have a convenience tracking program that runs in the summer, and that's annual. Retailers will be involved in moment of truth interviews, we call them. So this is a potential customer walking into your store or a customer who's just left your store, and we gain insights into their behavior, essentially. What was the main item they came in for? How much did they spend? Was there something there that they impulse bought? So different kinds of consumer insights. That's another way that retailers can get involved and learn more about their consumer base. Another thing that we do is
CSX
Database. So the CSX Database is the engine that runs the SOI enterprise. It is where all of our subscribers will provide their data, and then it is aggregated and pulled out for the State of the Industry Summit in April, as well as the State of the Industry Report. So anyone looking to get involved in CSX or provide data and get better benchmarking can contact Chris Rapinick in the research department. You can also go to our website on convenience.org/research and contact anyone in the research department, we'd be more than happy to talk to you about numbers and getting involved in benchmarking, anything related to that.
Well, I don't think we can't do our jobs. Most anybody at NACS can't do their jobs without the numbers that we have to tell our industry story, both the positive story about what we mean to communities, what we mean to the economy, what we mean everywhere as part of a broader retail set. And even more important is how do we make our members better? So I think some of the tools that we have are just critical for how do we grow our business, and how do we 50 years from now have an SOI report that has trillions as industry sales.
It'll be double the size too. 400 pages.
Good luck with that one, Jayme.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, Jayme, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been great hearing about this. And you said you can go to convenience.org/research to learn more, to see these products, to ask you all the questions.
Yep.
Thanks for coming. And thank you for listening to Convenience Matters.
Convenience Matters is brought to you by NACS and produced in partnership with Human Factor. For more information, visit convenience.org.